All right, so this is going to be the first talk that we have in a series of discussions on topics that bridge the New Age with the occult. So we find that in today's day and age, in the age of Aquarius, where information has now been revealed for about the last 40, 50 years, that there seems to be a split in the community amongst both those who have had the mysteries of old, while they have their certain traditions and things of that nature, and then the information that's been released and then taken in by those who are outside of those traditions. And then there seems to be a gap between two types of way of looking at the path. Now, in a sense, we here teach the middle path, or the middle way. And we talked a little bit in our first talk about finding that balance and that understanding, that third force of creation that helps us to awaken the consciousness and to grow and understand reality better. And the thing is that while we're all aware of the dualistic mind, we come to these studies intellectually, and the difference between the ego and the consciousness is that the subtlety of what it truly means to be in the present moment and aware, and to work with that third force, and to see past duality and to break those attachments, goes very deep. And at every level there's a dualistic mindset. If we look within the occult itself, you'll see that there'll be institutions of schools that are more intellectual based, and then there's others that are more heart based. And if we get too far to one side, it will pull us off of seeing that third force. But on an even more macro level than that, you have the bridge between the New Age and the occult studies. So we have the idea of just disidentifying, and then everything goes away, everything will be fine. Once we disidentify, it's all an illusion, so we don't have to do any work. And that in itself can be misguided. But we also have on the other end, where it's just work on the ego, and follow this formula that's dogmatic, and we don't actually awaken the consciousness. And that way we become just entombed in a new mystical pride ego, which is now basically religious and dogmatic. And even though we can develop psychic abilities and all of these things that can be developed with the ego, we still haven't freed or awakened the consciousness. So in that sense, this series is about taking things that are from here and here, that maybe has more focus on one side and less on the other, and trying to bridge the gap and show that really it's still all the same, and it is in both things, if we understand and see the universal thread and we know where to look.
I think that's a great introduction. We can go to the agenda.
Oh, and today we'll be talking about twin flames, which is a New Age topic that also we find that in the occult, this is not a topic that's very spoken about. When students bring it in, many instructors either will simply just say it has to do with an internal thing that we will talk about in this lecture, or that it's just a myth, and they dismiss this. Yet there's a happening that happens to many in the community, so we can't say that it's completely not something that is. There are no coincidences. People don't have connections to things if they don't exist. And to just ignore it because maybe the focus wasn't put on it isn't necessarily correct in that sense. So we're going to go first through the what is the twin flame journey and the New Age perspective on it. There's more information from that, at least that's public and known. And then we'll bring up some occult resources that actually show what it is about it, and actually really can clarify more what it is, because we see that a lot of times with things in the New Age community, it can be used to take advantage of people. They put out publicly, people in the New Age communities tend to have more ego, so therefore they're trying to make money, and these things can then become a way to draw in people that are vulnerable and maybe feel attached to these things. So, yes.
Yes, so we're going to be going through, first of all, what are the general ideas out there about twin flames? Has everyone here heard of twin flames? Yes. Okay. So
we'll also be going through cosmology as well too, because there's. Okay.
There.
Well, we'll also be going through some general cosmology, Gnostic cosmology, because to truly understand the concept outside of the base romanticism and everything that's going on around it, it really does take some understanding. So we'll be talking as well about soulmates and soul families, things of that nature.
Yes. So in order to unpack everything, we've got the archetypes that we need to look at. And these archetypes are not necessarily that if you had a feminine, divine feminine archetype, that you're in a female body. The physical body doesn't matter. It's the archetype. But we need to understand that to understand how we explain these different kinds of journeys. And then, as we said, we'll look at the New Age and then the esoteric perspective. And really, when we understand it from a soul level, it becomes less sentimental, but more profound, more meaningful. So that's where we're going to get to. So I remember when many years ago I was in an occult school in New Zealand, and after some time, I think it was in the second year, one of the students put up her hand and said, "What is the occult view on twin flames?" And at the time, those instructors said that, oh, there's a lot of sentimentalism and people want to create some kind of a structure around an experience that they had, some, the one that got away, and then they say that was my twin flame. So they can pine for this person that is no longer in their life, and then they can look at certain texts and resources and make a big story so they have more attachment, more suffering. And all of that is true. The majority of the people who say, I met this supposed one single person that was right for me, and now they're gone and I'm so sad, they're really just suffering in a kind of attachment for someone that got away, and they want to put a label on it so they can really dig their heels in and keep those memories going. And I think that's why those teachers said, look, it doesn't exist. Because for all intents and purposes, in the way that people think it exists, it doesn't. They use it to talk about when I meet someone, if I really like them and I have a strong affinity for them, they're my twin flame. And somebody that annoys me, they must not be my twin flame. So if I thought they were and then we got married and now we have an argument, then they're not my twin flame anymore. And the concepts around this also confuse many, many different things that we're going to separate so we can be precise. Because a soulmate and a twin flame and a karmic relationship are all different kinds of things. But usually, according to Gen Pop, all of these are lumped together. If they meet someone and they have piercing eyes, or they feel like they've known them, like they have this sense that they've met before, or they've been together before, that deja vu, which has its reasons, because the souls were together in the past, they say, this means you're my twin flame. And often what happens is that if it doesn't work out, then this person thinks there's no other person for them. And so it leads to a kind of a defeatist, deflated attitude. So because none of these ideas are really helpful, and they just lead someone into more delusion and attachment, this is why generally a teacher in esotericism or the occult will just say, oh, that doesn't exist. But it does exist, and we just need more understanding as to what it really means and what are all those other things.
So first, though, let's break down some of the different types of soul groupings from a New Age perspective. So this is where we're going to talk about sort of the cosmology and things behind that. But we have 4 main groups. Really, it's 3, but we split soulmate and karmic soulmate into 2 in the sense of that all soulmates are karmic, really. But usually when we're talking about a karmic soulmate, it is something that there's a negative recurrence there, and there's a lesson for us to learn. Perhaps maybe we were the abuser in a past life, now this person comes back to abuse us, but there's something binding us to them that creates a toxic relationship. And the reason why we make this distinction is because even though an actual soulmate is also karmic, usually those are your really good friends, that's the person that you've been marrying over many, many lifetimes, and those relationships don't work out as well, and those aren't the ones that get confused with the twin flame. So in that sense, we will talk about those 2 as well. The other thing that we have are hive mind fractals, or high-level soulmates, and these are related to soul families, and we'll get into that a little bit as well as to why that's important in the sense of the twin flame journey and things of that nature. So first, though, we have soulmates versus twin flames. Now, this is important because the difference between a soulmate and a twin flame is that we only have one twin flame. We only have one soul that resonates at the same frequency as us, and this has to do with a higher unfoldment where we split and have the exact same resonance from that soul. So it's our exact opposite. Not necessarily like a doppelganger or even necessarily has to be a partner, but it's just that from the higher unfoldment, we have the same frequency. We're the exact polarity that opposes each other. Now, soulmates can either be one, like we said, karmic, which are souls that we have been recurring with over many, many lifetimes, and the affinity has to do with karma or dharma, something good, and we've built up a relationship over many, many lifetimes. Twin flames don't necessarily have karma, dharma. In fact, actually, usually for the journey itself, we'll get into later, they usually don't have karma at all. They will not have met before in prior lifetimes until that it becomes time for the journey to be active. And then also the higher soulmate groups, like the high level soulmate groups, will be also, again, a higher unfoldment, can have multiple incarnations, have multiple spirit fractals that come from it. However, the high level soulmates won't be the one that's the polar opposite to you exactly. So these tend to actually be people you get along with really, really well, because just like your twin, you resonate at a similar frequency, but unlike the twin, they're not the exact mirror where you're like seeing all of your bad psychological effects in them as much. It's more like we really get along and we don't necessarily trigger each other perfectly in that aspect, because the egos don't line up perfectly in that sense. Now, within the twin flames itself, there are also two types that mainly come up. The third one is related to the high-level soulmates, but there's two types. There's the monadic twin flames and there's split souls. Now, this relates also to, again, the different levels in where the split came from. Twin flames that are monadic, and this is the ones that would be on journey, come from a higher unfoldment that is outside of the solar system, from somewhere, well, for all intents and purposes, in the unity, but really unity for us as a solar system as one being is another level in another much larger tree. So they've come from outside of the construct, and then when the Atman or their spirit sends down the soul, then the soul split. Split souls, on the other hand, would be a lower being that's already down here, and for a certain reason, the soul split at the soul level. So they maybe haven't actually incarnated the Atman yet, or the spirit, and they've split at a lower level of reality. And those are more rare, by the way, as well. At least they're more rare to meet, not more rare. Everyone has a twin soul, and actually probably most of the people on this planet would have split soul twin souls, but those aren't usually the ones that are pegged for the spiritual journey that we're talking about, and there's reasons for that, and we'll get into that as well. And now we have the unfoldment down from the absolute. So at the top of the diagram, we could say we have source, and from that oversoul unfolds many more oversouls, or we say monads, which then also unfold, and then they unfold and they unfold. And this comes down, for example, in a graphic like this, the top three here, we could say are related to the spirit that comes down into the universe. And that unfolds into this, which is our individual spirit or spirit group. This is Atman. This drops down souls as well, and then unfolds into beings here, which then unfold into us down here. Now, these unfoldments, if you want to look at from in a math type of perspective, they work in numbers of, I believe it's 144. Some people say 144,000. We could say it's 144, but the math is 12 times 12. At the lower layer of realities, we have the 12 zodiacs, we have 12 gods. The universe is organized, or the lower level of the universe is organized into 12s. So you have a positive and a negative through that duality. Each unfoldment can drop down 144, then each one after that 144, 144, and the math goes down like that. I do know that some New Age circles, they'll talk about the number 144,000 and say that everyone that you meet is like part of your spiritual family, but that's probably incorrect in the sense of, well, yes, if we go all the way to the top of Source, to the Supreme Oversoul, we're all the same soul family. But for example, someone who has a relation to the logos of the sun, we talked about logos last talk, or the logos of Mars, are in different spiritual groups, right? They're related to a different Atman, a different Cosmo creator. There's 7 Cosmo creators. If you're unfolding from one of those, you are in a different spiritual group at that level than someone else. So to say that everyone that you encountered with ever is your soul family is a little bit incorrect. But I can see the perspective on it, maybe if you're looking from it from outside.
Sometimes we look into someone's eyes and we can have this feeling that we are them looking back at ourselves, especially if you take the time to really look deeply. And the first time we notice this, it can be shocking or unsettling for those who began on a spiritual journey, however it happened, whether they maybe went to the jungles and took ayahuasca, or they did mushrooms one day and they said, oh no, I found out we're a unity and I don't know what to do with this. Different people have different experiences. But however it is that we first discovered that we are a unity, we are beginning to contact this interconnectedness. And so it is true that we are all one being. When we look at this kind of a diagram, it's showing exactly where in this big ocean we are, but it is one ocean. And when in esoteric studies we talk about being precise, because nothing is really good or bad, but we just want to know exactly what it is. And the ego is what overlays things and distorts it so we don't know exactly where it sits. So when we have this kind of an understanding, then we can understand better how, okay, if I meet someone and I observe over time how our interactions develop and I see whether it's healthy or not, I know what is going on. And then I can make appropriate conscious decisions based on what is happening. If I can see that it's karmic, I can see that it's toxic, any attachment or social pressures or these kinds of reasons are not enough for me to say, oh, I should continue in this kind of an interaction. But what we want is we want to gain the lesson from it. And if we find that we have a great affinity, then we might also realize that, oh, we have a lot in common. Maybe, for example, you have 2 people that they seem very similar, they don't trigger each other, but they can make a good partnership, and they also like music, for example. So the 7 Cosmo creators of the 7 rays help us to understand that it's not always the case, but if you do come together with a soulmate, then you'd be from the same ray and you would have those similar interests. So we say opposites attract, but that's because we have karma we're working out, and we're going to, in a way, punish each other or give each other these difficult experiences so that we can work out our karma. But if you have a harmonious relationship, it's not likely that kind of karma.
Well, if we look at it in this way, in the sense that fractals are up, right? On this, what they have as oversouls in this diagram is our higher self. So still our individual inner master, right? The part of ourselves that's still us, that's our highest subtle body, that is both omnipotent, omnipresent, but still within the solar system. And then above that is that monad is the unity, but the unity of the solar system, so the atom Kadmon, that one big being that we're like living in. And then as you see, there's lots of monads, because we can say every solar system might be this like superior being working on that. And then of course there's up more and more unfoldments beyond that, which we don't have a map of all of that all the way up, but it goes back, and at some point there is one divine source, one I am, one unity. And this is what we say when we're saying that you could have a spiritual family if you share a lower unfoldment with other fractals, then you're more close in resonance to those than, say, someone who came from all the way over there. But we're still all one in unity, but it's just that you have a closer unity to those beings than the other beings. So.
Another interesting thing about soul families is that when you come down as a kind of mission group, what the mission of each one looks like, it's not necessarily what we imagine it to be. So in order to balance the energies of the group that has come down, one of the group or a few of the group might have to fall or go into some kind of degeneration and experience the negative polarity for the other part of the group to experience the positive polarity. So we might find that, okay, I have these people that are very close to me, and then maybe they fall into drugs and addiction, and nothing I can do can get them out of that. But when we had this understanding, I'm not saying it's every case, but in some cases, especially if you receive a kind of internal confirmation, they're supposed to be doing that. And when it's the right time, then they'll do something else.
Would it be fair to say that twin flames aren't of the same ray, but your soul family is of the same ray, not in a like 1-to-1 ratio, but in a general sense?
I think twin flames would be of the same ray because you would be from the same unfoldment. Because in the sense of twin flames, if they're coming from a mission group and on the twin flame journey, which we'll talk about the difference between that, but if they're monadic twin flames, then they are part of the same soul family anyway, so they're part of that same unfoldment. But even split soul twin flames, because they're splitting from below the Atman, maybe they're a being that hasn't actually returned to unity yet, but in the development, so they split at a lower level, they still should be of the same ray.
Okay. I think that'd be like an important distinction to make, because you think the twin flame is somebody that's like, oh, especially if they're triggering you, you're like, this person just isn't on the same wavelength as me. So,
well, we're about to talk about the difference between that and the misconceptions, because the next thing we're going to move into is talking about the journey itself. And the thing is that in today's society, people having like all these like hopes for romanticism and all this, everybody wants to think, oh, there's that person that's definitely for me,
for sure.
And they end up in these toxic relationships, and we'll see in a second that they start off similar in the sense of there's a like a really like strong pull and like a sort of very hot honeymoon period or something of that nature, and that can be very similar between a karmic relationship and a twin flame journey. But the thing is that the other turns usually toxic, and then you're supposed to learn a lesson from it, and then you're supposed to escape from it and learn something. And the other one, there is a separation, but the separation usually tends to lead to an awakening, because it's specifically a process that is meant to awaken that person in the mission group. And we'll get into that in just a moment. But first, we're going to look at the two archetypes for the two participants in the classic twin flame journey. So first, we have the divine feminine. And as Ruth said earlier, these energies are related to the vital body and are not necessarily related to someone's gender. The divine feminine, someone who has more feminine energy, is able to, in their vital body, that means they're out of balance more to the feminine side. All of our superior bodies, except for our physical one, have both polarities of energy. It's only actually the physical body that has only one polarity, which is why when we talk about later on in Gnosis and working with alchemy and transmutation, that's why it has to be done in the physical. If it could be done anywhere else, then we would need to come down to this physical plane. But the polarities of our bodies, though, still are going to be out of balance, because we have to balance all our bodies, and the rest of it is with psychology. So the psychology of the divine feminine, someone who tends to have more of the feminine energy, which is more of the myavic energy, but they have a lot of it, tends to be the one that seeks the masculine energy, and they're more receptive. So they actually tend to be the opposite. We think of the masculine energy as the spiritual energy, but the divine feminine charged person, that is more of a draw to the spiritual and more of a draw to break out of the illusion. Whereas the divine masculine is the opposite. They have the energy that has more spirit and logic, so they tend to be more logical brain, and they're looking for the divine feminine energy, which the divine feminine energy is related to the illusion, related to Maya. So they tend to be very comfortable in systems and do things like that. Did you want to describe it?
Yeah, well, I mean, we can see that there's subjectively good and bad things from the divine feminine, and it's the same for the masculine. So the feminine is artistic, they're very creative, and they have that negative polarity, which is the minus, right? In all of reality, we have a plus and a minus, but we see that the negative quality is that they're needy, so they can become one who has a kind of desperate energy, or they need to go through the journey to transcend the abandonment wound. And actually, the divine masculine can also have the abandonment wound, but they display in different ways. And the feminine energy is the one who's the needy one that's chasing and saying, I want you, and is desperate. And of course, neither parties are going to be satisfied in this journey, because the point is to transcend it and to realize that you're already home, you're already love, and all these things, but you have to go through that journey. So that was some of the main things that it expresses. And this person might be described as they're quite moody, their emotions go up and down, and they're not something that's consistent and reliable. They can be happy and sad and all over the place, but they really need the other person in this journey. And then with the divine masculine, I think you like to call them the matrix twin.
Yes, I might as well say it now. The reason why I don't necessarily, they are divine feminine, divine masculine. The reason I don't like to usually use that terminology is because one of the very big misconceptions, and what leads a lot of, especially women, into the traps, is that there's a lot, first of all, just in society today, women can be in abusive relationships a lot easier that are toxic. And the thing is, they find out about twin flames, and then, you know, their karmic relationships, they project this onto them. And the thing is that actually in the spiritual community, the trend, and that's not saying for everyone in society, but the trend to those that get pulled to spirituality, it tends to be more men with a feminine polarity and women with a masculine polarity. And the suspicion is probably because to do the work, you need to balance yourself. And in today's day and age, where there's so much pressure to conform to societal norms, that if you're a masculine male or a feminine female, it's really easy to get pulled into the margins, you know. So it's a subtle advantage to be a little bit balanced already just by the physical nature of your physical and vital body. But that's just a suspicion. But the thing is there's a lot of divine masculine charged women that have karmic relationships, and then they're caught up and they're stuck waiting for their twin flame or all of this. And it's like, in that situation, they can't even be in the journey, because they're the ones that would be, if they were in a twin flame journey, the runner, not the chaser. So it certainly is something else. We all can be caught up in the toxic thing where someone's our abuser. That has nothing to do with energy. But it is something that we notice, because when we use the word divine feminine, all of a sudden every feminine person that is identified as being feminine then, you know, pulls themselves into this romanticism of this. In fact, to be fair, if we've heard about the concepts of certain things like this before, and this is just with anything in awakening, a lot of the times if we hear about something before it happens, it should always be a red flag, because as we talked about, Gnosis is knowledge through direct experience, and if Source wants you to be able to confirm something, usually it happened to you first, and then you'll find out about it, and then through your own Gnosis, you confirm that it happened. It's one of the biggest things I see in like the Reddit forums and stuff is just like, have you heard about twin flames before twin flames? You don't have a twin flame. Like, a lot of these things, and I think I talked about this.
It's confirmation bias.
Yeah, it's confirmation bias. But I talked about this in our first talk, where in the sense of just, my life, I had kind of two awakenings. I did psychedelic drugs when I was younger, and was opened up to experiences, metaphysical experiences, when I was really young age. And I had nothing to do with spirituality. I kind of just lived life and had experiences. And the only thing that I was really into, was you know, because of the experiences, I was into sci-fi, I was into the occult, but like in silly ways, like I was doing magic and then, you know, ancient aliens, all of that type of stuff, you know. But the thing is, to be in that mode and to be into that subject matter, the chances of me not having come across these teachings are like absurd. And it's actually more shocking that it took until after I actually went through a twin flame separation. And then at that time, the same stuff that I always look at on YouTube, all of a sudden the algorithm brings me Gnosis. And also I think Dolores Cannon from the New Age community, who also talks a lot about the same things, which again was a confirmation of things that I'd already seen. But I had seen them before, and that's what these teachings are all about. And in a sense, with everything that goes on when we come into these teachings, and it's okay if somebody comes without having the mystical experience, but we need to be tempered when we learn about something first, and then now all of a sudden that's what we see. Because what we'll learn is when we actually go through these things, while the archetypes, they're there for a reason and there's some truth to it, everything else that we read in scripture from a master, everything is subjective to that master's experience. So if we're like trying to have the same visual initiation that, say, Master Samael said, that initiation, if you're really having it, might not look like that. You're not going to see the same type of beings that he's seen. Now, the part that will
Or
be
it might
objective,
not be real if it looks
yeah,
exactly the same.
the part that might be objective is you might have a test that deals with this type of psychological problem, right? Like let's say it's the fifth initiation is related to disidentifying from your person. You'll have a test on that. But how that looks to you will probably not look like how it looks to somebody else if you actually got it right. Now, if it looks like something else, that means your ego gave it to you and you're trapped within an illusion and you actually probably haven't passed that test. You just think that you passed that test because your mind is giving you what you think it should look like. Because we all have a unique internal world to ourselves, right? So that's just a rule of thumb with everything, but especially also with these things, is that people find out about this online and then, you know, all of a sudden everyone has a twin flame. And everybody wants to find it. And the thing is, it's not even supposed to be a romantic thing. So basically, the twin flame journey itself, from the New Age perspective, it's a spiritual journey and it is meant to trigger awakening. While, yes, everybody romanticizes this concept of reunion that comes at the end when when the spiritual twin, so like I said, spiritual twin, the matrix, when the spiritual twin awakens and then does enough work that they become a master and they pull the other up, because the other one, the matrix twin, doesn't do the work. They do the opposite. They run away. No, but they run away and they become asleep to provide the force for the other one to go up, right? And then was to be pulled by the energy through. That happens so much later from our understanding, and we'll go through the archetypes, but from my understanding, the archetype of it happens so much later in the journey of awakening that it almost certainly will happen in another lifetime. The only examples we've seen of reunion in scripture are with masters that did not meet their partner in the beginning of their lifetime. That doesn't mean they didn't meet them and go through that, but not in that incarnation. So the whole concept of, oh, I broke up my twin and now I'm pining for them to come back in reunion and I've had my awakening. If you actually had your awakening and you went through this process, what happens is the energy reverses because you awaken to unity consciousness. And if someone awakens to unity consciousness and they know, even if the other person is their twin, and even though there are connections through the astral, there are all these things, but you know the other person is asleep. And if you're doing the work here, that's not a person that you would want to partner with. It's not that you have ill will for them. Of course, you connect on unconditional love. You love everyone, and this person is even closer to you on a spiritual karmic level. But the desire for that passionate way is absolutely not there. In a sense, even though they're not chasing you anymore, like, because they're unconsciously, they're not like chasing you, trying to come get you. Energetically, they're now the one that is chasing you, and you're ascending. So, if you actually go through this, there is a dark night of the soul. It is very painful, but there's an awakening to unity consciousness, and you absolutely would not be thinking about the other person or even wanting to be with them because you've now raised the level of being. So that's a major thing that comes from this journey. For me, I don't personally know anyone else outside of myself that I believe to have truly gone through the journey. But there are people, like you can find people online that actually describe it in a proper way, so I'm saying the only one that's happened. But from our understanding is that it is a very, very rare occurrence because of the fact of what we'll talk about later, but there seems to be that it's related to the monadic twin souls as opposed to the split souls. So that means We talk about mission groups. We could, in New Age, we could talk about star seeds, which I forgot to say that when we were on the other side. But star seeds, which is basically the same concept of sons of wisdom and the occult, but of a unity being that comes back down into the solar system from outside and splits into many, and has already done this work. It's gone through a planetary chain and has left, and now it's coming back to help the planet and those that are now in the stage that they're still growing through their spiritual journey, and that probably just being another stage of the spirit's evolution. So while it is a thing, from my understanding, it is very, very, very extremely rare. And we'll talk about when the masters talk about and give all these explanations as well. But the standard journey, goes through the recognition and the initial awakening, right? So in that sense, that's where they have you just met, and it's like you've known the person forever, and it's like you just hit off like that. In my personal experience, I went on a Bumble date, and like 5 minutes later, we were like talking about like doing acid and all these other crazy things, and we hit it off really well, me and this girl, and it was supposed to be like a hookup, obviously a hookup app, and we ended up spending 5 years together, we got engaged, and then a split happened later. But that's what it was, just like an instant, like you don't think anything of it, and there's that instant magnetism. This also can occur now. Not in a relationship sense, or probably not for the journey, but if you meet a twin flame that's your split soul, it can happen that this isn't a romantic thing. So you might, in rare cases, because it's very rare to meet a twin flame if you're not on the journey, but you might meet a twin that is, say, of the same gender or different age groups, and it can still go through like a kind of semi part of this journey because there's some markers to it, but it's not exactly the same thing. And then, of course, at the beginning, it's usually there's like a honeymoon period, and it's like there's like a hot, fast attraction, and everything of that happens. And then eventually, once that finishes, like any relationship, you start to trigger each other a lot, in the sense of you are like the same person. So you have everything you don't. We teach in Gnosis that what we usually see in others that annoys us and frustrates us is what we don't like about ourselves. So imagine there's a person that has everything that you don't like about yourself in them, right? Because they're your mirror. So that starts to happen. But there's also one other thing before that also tends to happen, and that is we don't have this on the slide, but there's a kind of a mentor-mentee relationship between the spiritual twin and the matrix twin, in the sense of I don't want to say that it's kind of a give take both ways. Like for example, in my experience, the twin that was the matrix twin actually was like more into maybe religious stuff than me in an intellectual way, and introduced me to a lot of things like the occult and magic and things of that nature. But where the teaching comes, I guess, as the spiritual twin being a teacher, is the conscious freedom and being more loose and like pulling out of society. There tends to be a phase where they pull the matrix twin out of that, and then because the matrix twin is more in society, because they have usually a lot more support from their family and they have a regular job, usually the pressures of their friends and their family, which is exactly what happened in the case with me, eventually ends up getting them to like, what are you doing? You're like getting off track of your life. You have to get back to being a real person. And they freak out and they double down on going back to sleep. And even though they have a bit of awakening, which is why we say it's recognition awakening, the matrix can wake up a little bit and then they choose the matrix. Thus, they run. And it happens out of nowhere. It's not like there's like a fight or there's something, it just happens. And then that, of course, sends the spiritual twin into a dark night of the soul. The spiritual twin then, thus, through working on themselves and disidentification, has the awakening to unity consciousness, which is what I experienced after finding the teachings with Kidney Journey at that time. And basically, I locked myself in a room for 2 weeks and just meditated until I could really break away from my person. So, and then after that, like I said, the energy switches. Usually, there's no contact anyway, because at first, during the painful, the chaser, pisses off the matrix twin, who usually has I want to say the Matrix one usually has like a what's the avoidant personality.
Yeah,
So they usually tend to be blocking
attachment.
them, and all of these things are normal to it. So they're not even talking usually, but once that awakening happens, you also don't necessarily want to talk to them. So you just kind of just move on and you just do your own work, your own inner work, and your own, like we said, we have inner work, self-union, and then surrender. And then through that, that's the real point of this journey, is to get to that point. We all can get to it also, by the way, in many different ways. Usually there's a big moment of suffering and darkness before anyone's awakening. It just doesn't have to be from a relationship. It's just this specific one is designed for beings that have come down and have a shared mission, and they split like that. And usually the shared mission is not between even just the two of them, but a larger mission group, as we've talked about. So that's one of the keys on that. But the union, which I can't speak from experience, I don't have a union, I actually have a different wife, so who is actually a high-level soulmate from the same mission group. So we're aware of a few others that actually are karmically attached to us. But reunion allegedly would happen. We talked about how we have to create subtle bodies and eventually remove ego, and eventually you want to move to a place where you shed all attachment, including the physical body, and evolve into a being of light. This would be symbolized by like Jesus in the resurrection on the cross. What that's symbolizing is that he died to himself and then he evolved into another man. And in that sense, as we'll see with the occult teachings that we'll get to next, is that moment where the souls are adjourned both internally and, if it happens externally, depending on the level of spirit, it doesn't happen until very late in that journey, like almost right before resurrection. So it's most likely not, that's why he says optional. Union is optional.
Some future life.
Because it's most likely in a future lifetime. The only thing I would say is, in this time period, in this time frame, everything is sped up. So
who could say? But what I would add here as well, we said that it's likely, or there's a good chance that if you come across some material, that if it hasn't happened, it's not going to happen to you, because now you've seen it. Otherwise, you would have confirmation bias. So if there was a plan from the construct for you to have a twin flame journey, if you were going to have it, you would already have had it. And if you're having this talk, then you're probably not going to have it in this lifetime. But what can we actually learn as individuals from this is that in order for us to awakening, to reach a new height of awareness and perception, we do have to go through a kind of suffering or difficulty. And if everything is just too cruisy, too peaceful, then potentially we're missing something, some opportunity to move into a new challenge, a new stage of growth. And often we can have a kind of peacefulness that is a form of sleep, where we want everything to be how it has been. And as long as we don't rock the boat, we don't discover anything new within ourselves, any new potential, it can supposedly appear very peaceful and nice. Think of some small town, some very quiet suburb where everything is mechanical and happens the same. There's no new artists or new kinds of services being invented. Everyone just does the same thing and no one wants anything to change. Those people are having a very pleasant dream. But the awakening means that our reality is going to be shattered. The edges of what's possible have to be broken so we can see something new. So that process, in the same way that giving birth is painful but produces a baby, our own birth into something higher requires us going through that kind of giving up, which is why it says here surrender. So if we can get to a surrender point, a point of detachment without going through additional suffering, then good. If the more that we release, the less we have to have that tug of war internally.
Mm. And that's the, like I said, that's the goal of this journey, or any type of thing that's meant to awaken us, is to awaken. It's not to have this romantic reunion that may or may not happen. And if we're pining for it, then that means we probably didn't go through it because we don't understand what it was in the first place. And just real quick before we get to the esoteric perspective on this, which will be a little bit, we'll be able to go into the nuances a little bit more. But we just want to put out the order of a karmic soulmate. Now, like we said before, all soulmates are technically karmic. When we're saying karmic soulmate, we mean like a toxic relationship. So like one that there's supposed to be a lesson learned. And if you'll see on this what's the word?
I'd say like outline.
Yeah, this outline, which is similar to the other one, it starts kind of the same way. Kind of an instant attraction recognition, it's really bonding, and there's like an intense honeymoon period. But quickly, it turns into something that is abusive, emotional dependency, then on again, off again, which I see thrown a lot around in the twin flame community, like the getting back together and stuff. And they say, oh, that just means if you got back together and broke up again, you weren't ready for reunion yet because you haven't awakened. All of that seems like a little bit of a mistake because that seems to be more of, I've actually been also in karmic relationships before, and to me, whereas maybe the Matrix Twin will gaslight you a little bit about you having arguments, you have arguments more like a regular couple. Every couple has arguments if you're unconscious and you're not observing yourself. You know what I mean? But you know, when we're talking about like violence and cheating and you know, like all these like crazy things, that's probably not a twin flame relationship, to be fair. And also, a lot of times is that, like I said, there was that mentor-mentee thing that a lot of times you don't see in this. That's also a red flag. It's like, oh, you met somebody for like, you know, twice, and I just know they were twin flame, and then they ran off. You know, if they just ran off on you, you didn't really have an interaction. That's also usually, there's something off about that as well, because there's supposed to be some type of exchange. Because even though the Matrix Twin goes off and goes back into the Matrix, they gain something and they learn something from the experience as well. They just, when faced with the choice, choose the illusion because that's their role in the ritual. Actually, it's really funny when I was looking at the star charts of members of our soul family. It wasn't that like twins thing. It said her mission is to like in our Mayan star chart to go and like play with the illusion or something along those lines. But
we obviously all meet these kinds of karmic soulmates, and a very interesting story comes to mind. I recall this one couple from South America that were visiting me in New Zealand. I think the wife was from overseas and the husband was South American, and she had gone on one of those eat, pray, love journeys, and then she met him, and they started to have a lot of trouble in their new life together. It wasn't that they were arguing, but they seemed to be having a lot of bad luck. A lot of difficult situations were coming to them, and someone casually said, oh, I think you need to go see some spiritual people to help you out. And so they went to some ladies that had contact beyond the veil, and they asked them, can you see what's happening to us? And they said, oh, yes, someone has cursed you. This man, the South American man, one of your friends doesn't agree with you being with this woman and decided to put a curse on you guys to try and make you break up. And so they asked the spiritual ladies to remove the curse, which no problem, they did. And then those ladies said, actually, we can see a lot of interesting things about your past lives, that you two have been together for many, 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 many lifetimes, and you weren't always a couple. A long, long time ago, you started out in a connection that was very violent, and one was a murderer and the other was the victim, and you went back and forth with that karma for a while, and then at one point one of you kidnapped the other, and it kept going and going, and slowly as you worked out your karma, you started to get married and become a couple, and now you're having these karmic marriages. But it was very funny that they started based in violence, and they took many, many lifetimes to move from that to being a married couple.
Yeah, and everybody should recognize the patterns in a karmic soulmate as well, because the relationships also, again, don't have to be romantic. If you even just had a toxic friend or like, you know, a toxic family member. But the point is, any types of relationships like that, we're supposed to learn something from it, and once we learn our lesson, even if it's like a family member that's still in our family, so we don't cut them off completely, it somehow magically just seems like you get released from whatever it is that keeps you in that like cycle of perpetual like abuse between each other. So
yes, can confirm. Like if you have someone that you think this is a really bad family member, and then one day you awaken regarding the nature of the relationship, and you realize my piece to the puzzle is that I hold so much resentment towards them, and I'm always painting them out to be the bad guy, and actually I'm full of judgment, and I keep making stories internally about why we don't like them, and then I go and tell all my friends, and of course they're sycophants, and they confirm that to me, and we're collectively hating this person, but they're just being themselves. They're just doing what they're doing, and wow, actually I'm a very hateful person in this relationship. And then we transcend that, and we find that, oh, this person no longer bothers us, and the nature of our relationship changes. Maybe they're not always coming around doing those things that used to annoy us, because they don't have to. We've released them from that role, and we learn that lesson, so they don't do those things anymore.
Now we're going to talk about the esoteric perspective, which, as we said in before, a lot of instructors or people in things like Gnosis and Theosophy think that these things aren't necessarily mentioned or highlighted too much, and that they might not even be there. It's just like a New Age concept that came out of nowhere. But actually, what we'll see is that while, for example, Master Samael, who created Gnosis, doesn't really focus on it because it wasn't his concern really. He was more concerned about revealing alchemy and, well, the karmic marriages, right? And that sort of thing. He does mention it in passing, in fact. And actually, the help that we can see from what the Masters gives, if we apply it to the general overall arcing narrative of what the journey is, with an esoteric perspective on it, then it actually starts to make a lot more sense, and it makes a lot more sense as to why it is that it's so rare, why it is that it's very unlikely that we'll even meet a twin soul, even though we have one, and why it's reserved usually for star seeds or mission group, whatever you want to call them, but like of people with a higher grade of spirit. First, this is a quote from The Revolution of Basilbab, and in this quote, the master talks about the difference between cosmic marriages and karmic marriages. And it's like a throwaway paragraph in a book about him helping a demon return from the abyss and what was it, rehabilitate himself?
Well, he goes from being in the Klepots and doing the left-handed path to taking a positive path.
Yeah, so the book's not even about this, but just there's a throwaway line there. This happens a lot sometimes with the masters. They talk about something else and they'll say something and nobody pays attention to it. But right here, we'll read this quote. Or do you want to read the quote?
Yeah, I can read it. I'm just going to read it from the big screen here. So, 2 classes of married bonds exist: karmic, that begin from the physical plane upwards, and cosmic, that begins from above to below. This is the marriage of a couple who in the superior planes receives a mission to fulfill, and thereafter they go and find themselves in the different planes and verify the different marriages until finding themselves in the physical plane, giving rise to the great loves, to which death does not frighten because they live within their love, and such a love makes them immortal. They are also a perfect matrimony. But what we see here is that when he talks about the different planes, he's talking about these different levels of reality, and we'll come to it in a moment. But when 2 souls join, it's not like 2 people, it's just energy.
Read the rest of the quote for the
there's more. Okay. Yes. Okay. A great majority of beings encounter each other throughout the ages and become husband and wife in different returns and on different places of the earth. This produces great affinity and mutual knowledge. All this makes us understand the critical aspect, that is, for a man or the woman to perform their marriage based purely on their own social convenience, which gives rise to a series of afflicted conditions that both have to endure. So that's the karmic situations.
And this is key to what we were talking about in a sense here. So, Master Samael, when he reveals his teachings, is more focused on helping the average soul, average spirit that's on this planet, that's still within the spiral, and he's more concerned with these karmic marriages. But he does describe that there's two types of ways that we can have it. So a being that is still growing we go from mineral, plant, animal, become a human, and then we have to start creating the bodies that are over here. So we're starting from the physical here, right? This is Malkuth on the Tree of Life, which is the physical plane. It's the 3rd dimension. Now, when we begin to grow and evolve and create our higher subtle bodies, we have 7 total bodies. So we have the physical body, the vital body, which is really part of the physical body. Technically, we're 4th dimensional beings. We're just really degenerated and we don't perceive the 4th dimension. But we have an energetic field around our body. We know this from Eastern medicine, all of these things. In a sense, we're in the 4th dimension. We see duration going by us, right? We can't move through the 4th dimension, but we know that we're living in that sphere. Then we have the 5th dimension, which includes the astral body and the mental body. This is the plane of our emotions, our mind. And then we have our souls. We actually have 2 souls, which is important internally. We have the human soul, which is where if we regain this body or create this body, where our spirit, because this is our spirit, this is Atman, our 7th body, or higher self. Our spirit can come down into this vessel, so this is kind of a vehicle, our soul is a vehicle for the spirit to be able to eventually enter this body. At the current moment, we say in Gnosis that we have an essence, not exactly a soul. Essence being a piece of that soul because it's obscured by the ego, right? And then we also have, though, this other soul, which is the divine soul, which is the spirit's normal vehicle when it's just up in the superior planes. But we have these 2 souls, and these are all our bodies. This is related to our will, this is related to our internal individual consciousness, and that's our individual spirit. Now, when Master Samuel is talking about karmic marriages, he's talking about in the sense of, if we've been living on this planet for a very, very, very long time, over many, many lifetimes, you find a partner that you begin doing these works with over many, many lifetimes, and slowly you build a connection that moves up. So first, we say that we get joined in the physical plane, then we're joined in the physical and the vital, then we're joined in the physical, vital, and the emotions, and we're slowly creating these bodies up together over these many journeys and lifetimes to create the Atman for the first time, or to create that higher self, because we actually haven't achieved that level yet, and that's the majority of the people naturally going through the spiral, right? To go from a human to an angel, right? We could say an angel is related to that, and there's also levels of angels, but for that purpose, right? Now, what the clue is when he talks about the cosmic marriages, is what he says is a being that comes down from here that already is married at the Atman, and they split into 2 souls, and they go down on their merry way and have different missions. So they're already here joined and not joined anywhere else, meaning that they've already done the work one time and come back, at least once. And that's literally what the twin flame journey is talking about, in the sense of the difference between the monadic twins and the split soul twins. And this is on an internal section. Remember, everything as within, so without, as above, so below. So that aspect is where we see the difference in those things, and that's also why it would be so much more rare. We talk about the concept of star seeds in New Age. That's basically the same idea, but extraterrestrials, or whatever you want to call them, angels, like beings from off planet. Technically, everyone's a being from off planet. At the highest level, all the spirit comes down from above. So that those types of beings that come down to do a mission to help humanity, and they're already developed to a certain point, so they experience the journey. Whereas others, they don't, because they're the spirit is in that level. They could meet their twin soul, but it's usually not even the one, and we'll have a quote on that too, it's usually not even the one that they're necessarily doing the work with. There's a quote actually from Master Samael that is not related to this, but a lot of people that come into Gnosis get hung up on because they think they have a twin flame and it's dangerous. But there's a quote that he said that the soul that we fell from Eden with is the one that we have to return with. So people all think that means twin flame reunion. But it actually doesn't, because what it means is that from the first fall, and Master Samael relates the fall to the first sin of lust, because that was his thing, he means that the person that you've been practicing with alchemy, if you talk about karmic marriages, you have to be practicing with that person because you have to join all these bodies. So if you had started the work with them, then you have to find them again in this lifetime. So he's actually talking about not twin flames, but that quote gets confused for it a lot. Because actually, if you're a split soul twin flame, I mean, they can't be like in the abyss, they can't be descended, but as long as you both are doing the work, then the person can send out, but they don't have to have the same partner actually at all. Yeah, and also it's like it'd be impossible if somebody was actually up here and they were a split soul twin flame. Their other one wouldn't be that far down that it would affect them from doing the work anyway. That's what the master said, that it would be arranged. All these things are arranged. It's just like our partners. When we need to work in the alchemy, we have a lot of people that come in and they are so worried about being single. It's like, it doesn't matter if you're single. You're in the right place. It's almost better to come into the work single at first because you focus on yourself. And then your vibration raises and you magnetize someone to you that's ready to do the work with you.
So here we have a quote from the book The Three Mountains, which is about the path of initiation. And this specific part relays the symbology that is in the story of Helen and how it relates to soul marriage. So the master says, Atman, the being, has two souls. The first is the spiritual soul, which is feminine, buddhi. The second is the human soul, and it is masculine, the superior manas. The beautiful Helen of Troy is the same Helen in Goethi? Is that how you say it? I always Gothier. Okay.
There we go.
Okay. Faust, the Shakti or feminine potential of the internal being. He and she, Buddhi Manas, are the twin souls within ourselves, even when the intellectual animal still does not have them incarnated. They are the two beloved children of Atman, the innermost. They are the eternal bride and groom who are always in love.
So, coming back to here, we're talking about Manas, or the human soul, the causal body, and Buddhi, which is the divine soul. And these are two internal spirits we have. This is related to our own inner consciousness, or the intimate Christ. Not the cosmic Christ, but the intimate, our own fractal of that consciousness, the feminine principle of it, as it says in the quote. Now, there's a point in the path, I believe, it's the second mountain? But there's a point in the path after mastery, so someone would already have achieved mastery, where these two souls internally do need to be returned together before we can eventually reclaim Atman. These we don't create, they're always there. This is our higher self, but to gain access to them, there's just a process that involves marrying these two souls. And we see this in mythology symbolically as Helen of Troy, when Helen is kidnapped away by the Trojans or under the spell of lust, because Aphrodite gives Paris this girdle that makes any woman fall in love with him. And of course, actually, you guys know that myth?
What's that?
Do you guys know the myth of Helen of Troy?
No.
Okay, so it's really funny. So the Trojan prince Paris sees these three goddesses. It's like Hera, Aphrodite, and Athena, and they're arguing with each other. And they go, "Oh, which one of us is the most beautiful?" And then, of course, they try to bribe them because they're goddesses, right? So, I think Hera says, "If you pick me, I'll make you the most powerful man in the world, and you'll be king of the entire world." And Athena says, I forget what she says, something also that's really, really cool. And then Aphrodite, though, says, "Oh, I'll just give you the most beautiful woman in the world." Somebody says maybe it's all the wealth or something. And of course, he thinks with his other brain, and he picks the one that's going to give him the woman, which is silly to me because you would think if you were like the most powerful man in the world and had all the money, you'd get all the other things. But usually that's how it works in like the society. But anyway, he picks that, and then he goes and basically abducts, under a spell, he abducts the Spartan king's wife and brings her back to Troy. Thus, all the Greeks, which is the symbol of the human soul and the willpower to come back and get back the divine soul from the ego. And that myth is literally about that initiation, so marrying the human soul to the divine soul. There's a bunch of other myths on it too. King Arthur is the Atman, Ar-Tir Man, right? So rune Ar-Tir Man, Arthur, relates to the Atman, he's a spirit, and then Guinevere and Lancelot. So Lancelot and Guinevere, their little tryst in there, even though Guinevere is married to Arthur, right? That represents this trinity. There's also, I believe, the St. George, when he kills the dragon. We have a picture of it over there, but so he slays the dragon also to rescue the divine soul, or to rescue the princess. Now, like I said, this is something that happens later on in the path after one has already incarnated their soul and is trying to incarnate the spirit. When we look at this, though, and we look at this as an as above, so below, or as within, so without, there's another clue as to why this would only manifest externally for a higher level spirit. So, because if we're working, say, to this unfoldment, and this this is like supposed to be like the person, right? This would be then happening above, right? So for this to be internal and something to come out externally, it would more than likely have to be for a being that comes from up here that's already incarnated this. And then, thus, its internal experience coming out externally, because at this point, at this level, it's still, you're this being creates something above you. But if you're from here, it's something underneath you and down inside of your psychology. So it becomes, you're creating your psychology from that creation. So in that sense, this is internal for everyone, but for it to manifest externally, we'd have to reach a certain level on the tree of life, if that makes sense.
I think one of the most practical ways to understand this is that when it's a very intense and high-level cosmic drama, then as part of the big cosmic dance, it is displayed externally. So if we look at the initiate, Jesus Christ, he came down and he went out into society. He gave certain teachings that, of course, were later skewed and turned into something else. But all of society came against him and rejected him, and then they killed him. And what he was really representing was this divine message of love and unity that comes down, and the ego doesn't understand it, and it rejects it. But through that principle of sacrifice, which is what he demonstrated by not being attached to any of those external experiences and still loving the perpetrators who took his life, he demonstrated that by the principle of sacrifice, we can overcome all of these difficulties and create something on a higher octave. So this initiate came into the world, and he displayed a drama that is true on a very meta level, and he displayed it physically. But that doesn't mean that if I go and walk a spiritual path, now I'm also going to be crucified as well.
I guess what I mean is that in a sense of the only things that come out externally is something that we've already mastered already. So if we're an initiate that's mastering this being, if we're working to awaken, self-realize this, has already mastered this aspect. So we see our elements come out as external things, the fire, water, in our psychology, and then we also face trials externally of people getting angry with us, or like overthinking, things of that nature. But we have yet to master this. A being from up here, or a spirit from here, has mastered this as well. So then this psychology comes out into the external as well. If that's sort of what I'm trying to get at.
But if we say that we are not a being that's from that level, then our spiritual work would be to unite those souls internally.
Yes.
Not to have a twin flame.
Well, you always still have to reunite it internally because you have to recapitulate it. But because you're recapitulating, then it also has an external manifestation. Right. So, in that sense, we always have to redo all the work. We have to do all the work from the bottom. It would be too easy if you could just come back. It happens maybe quicker. It can happen quicker for you. We could get the trials faster. They say actually, for example, someone who is creating the astral body for the first time, it would take like 18 lifetimes, so which means that anyone who's drawn into these teachings more than likely and finds a connection to them at this point in time has done it before. So that everyone is recapitulating to some extent how much, where. If the teachings resonate with you, it's almost certain that in this day and age, with the time period that we're in, is that you've done the work at least once, at least to hear. And then you already have the bodies, which is why, we say technically the teaching is to create the bodies, you have to work with a certain way, but realistically anybody who is actually still creating the bodies right now would not have the force to probably engage with the awakening, and it's too dense right now that everybody looks around the world, all the terrible things that are happening, all the negative vibrations, it's so easy to fall asleep with the distractions of the psychology.
So here we have a couple small excerpts that bring home the Gnostic understanding, and there's some real life examples from one of the masters. So this is taken from a conference, and there were two different masters that are quoted here. So the first one is Master Michael.
Oh, this is also an example of the split souls and how they don't end up necessarily having the journey.
Okay, so I'll just tell the stories and then you can unpack that. But we have his explanation about the twin soul. So he says the twin soul comes from when the human being was still androgynous in Lemuria. I don't know how deep you want to go with that, with the Lemurian myths.
Yeah, in esotericism, whether it's theosophy or Gnosticism, it was understand that there was multiple root races on this planet, and the first 2.5 were before the gender split. So
That's the short story, is that we used to be androgynous, and so if you had a split that when you were an androgynous being and you split into male and female, then that's a kind of split, but it's not the same as a twin soul. So this master is giving that differentiation because some people were asking, and he said that's one kind of twin soul, but it's not the same thing as a soul that's split from the higher levels.
No, like I said, it's literally the esoteric version of the split soul as opposed to the monadic.
Okay, so then we have the actual twin flames, and this master mentions his one, Master Lakshmi. He says, marrying your twin is something very, very difficult to happen. It is 1 in a million. And it is said in the Gnostic stories that this master knew who his twin flame was. And she wasn't his wife. She was just a young girl that was in their community, and he knew about her. And he said to some of his other people who were there practicing Gnosis, and he said, oh, can you guys look out for her? She's my twin flame. We just have to make sure she doesn't fall. So he knew that it was important for her to be doing the spiritual work, to be having some kind of a spiritual path, and to not fall into degeneration in order for him to keep moving along. But they didn't necessarily have to be married. His wife was someone else. And then, so then the Master Michael clarified, for one of them to go to the absolute, the other can't be fallen. And that's what we said. They just have to be, like if we say doing the spiritual work, what exactly that looks like can vary, but they couldn't necessarily be, say, a Satanist who's taking a left-hand path and trying to pull themselves down into the abyss, for example.
All right, and then to wrap this up before questions, we want to also just give an example of what one example of what we're absolutely certain is reunion in Scripture, right? And this is to hammer home the point that it does not have to happen in your lifetime. It is a thing, but the journey can be over many incarnations. And that's Jesus and Mary Magdalene. It's the only absolutely definite symbology for reunion, in the sense of Mary Magdalene wasn't doing anything. She was a prostitute, as they say in the Bible, but prostitute in the sense of someone who is in lust and in an ego and not doing the work, right? She
It doesn't have to be literally.
If we take it symbolically, that's what a prostitute is, right? And she just meets Jesus, and he's pretty close to the end of his journey, like we said, at the high of the second mountain, and from just meeting him, she becomes his highest disciple, at least esoterically. I know the church has the highest disciple, and eventually his wife. So, to us, that's the exact symbol of what the reunion is supposed to be. But notice, he didn't meet Mary Magdalene as a kid, or at least it's not in the Bible, and that they found each other again later. So, while it's an example of that journey and it's an example of reunion, it's also a cautionary tale to all those who end up in this situation that are just like, I'm just waiting for my twin flame to come back. Because if that's what you're doing, then even if you actually, that was the experience that you had, then you didn't learn what you're supposed to from it, because you're supposed to awaken from it and then move forward and surrender the idea of the twin flame in itself.
Yeah, that's good. So then, now we move into practicality. And I think we've talked about this during the course. Like we said, it's less important that we have a twin flame journey, because we know it's quite rare, and it's more important to understand that we transcend our suffering and our difficulties by observing and comprehending the situations that we're in and having that surrender. And then when we extract the wisdom from those situations, then the soul has its growth, and the person that we are meant to find, we will find without any kind of trying or seeking or doing something in particular. The most important thing is just that we work on ourselves, and even after we find said person, we still do the same thing. We still continue to work on ourselves. So it's not like some moment that we put up on a pedestal and take it out of its place.
And the most important thing with the practicality is get back to the same thing we said in the first talk. The work is to know thyself, know theseton, right? Know thyself, and you shall know the universe and its gods. And as we pointed out, a lot of the times with these situations, with the mass hysteria, and the people who think they're in twin flame journey or not, it's almost exclusively people that are in a karmic relationship that just aren't learning the lesson they're supposed to learn. Or, there's a lot of females with divine masculine energy that don't even realize their own energetic polarity, and they're pining for this as well. There's a lot of that going on. All of these things can be simply solved with the simple self-observation practices that we're talking about. It's not even something that, awakening the consciousness that also takes self-observation and then balancing our energies. But even before balancing our energies, it's just being honest with ourselves, and really looking at ourselves, and being honest about what the situation is, and honest about who we are. And then we would see the delusion.
When we seek balance, we're seeking to balance everything that is out of place internally. And it's no different whether you're struggling with the divine feminine or divine masculine archetype. There are things that we curse or bemoan about the world, and it is precisely something inside of ourselves that is making us have that perspective. For example, a common one for divine masculine is to say, all the men are bad, they're all so terrible, and everyone that I met was like such and such a way, and they trick and they lie, and they say, oh, where's a real man around here? In my last experience, it was like this, and he did this, and oh, it's so terrible, and then it gets worse. They can say, oh, all men don't love women, and I'm never going to meet the right man, and actually women are being more and more oppressed. The more that I think about it, every day we're getting more and more oppressed, and nobody understands us. And of course, sure, there's a small measure of truth in every kind of perspective that we can have like this, but really what we're building is bigger and bigger walls that are pushing away the very thing that we're seeking. So when we have these kinds of complaints about the world and our situation, to come back into balance is to break that illusion and to stop perpetuating those internal dramas that are being recreated in the external.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing that we can learn from that.
It made me think of the Diogenes, I'm looking for a man, but that's not something else.
Well, since you've mentioned it, you have to tell them what it is.
Yeah, there's a famous, philosopher?
Yes, it's a philosopher.
But he was an awakened person back in ancient Athens. And it's actually the influence for Arcanum 9, the Hermit, and the tarot card, the guy walking around with the lantern and stick. But he was said to have walked around Athens with a lantern and was banging up those doors and be like, I'm looking for a real man. And he meant like a solar man, someone who had awakened the consciousness and created the soul. So he was like, I can't find a man. And then he was like basically disrespecting all the men in the town. And they were just getting mad at him. Apparently, he lived in a barrel or something like that. He basically lived on the street.
A hermit.
Yeah. And that even Alexander the Great came to meet this guy who created all the stir. And he asked Alexander the Great, who was the most powerful man in the world at the time, he's like, oh, do you mind moving? You're blocking the sun. And then apparently Alexander was so enamored with the fact that he just disrespected him and wasn't scared of him at all, that he liked him a lot. So, random story.
Yes. But that's not the same thing that I was talking about.
I know, because it's like the quote.
It is funny, yes.
You can take questions now. It could be either about the lecture or just general Gnosis things since it's an open talk. Anybody has any questions?
Or comments, reflections.
That's 1 in a million to find a twin flame? Is that what you're saying? It's quite rare.
Yeah, well, especially that's in the sense of if it's like someone who's like a split soul.
Yeah.
So it's not impossible, but it's unlikely because there's not a mission for them to come into interaction. They might be on the other side of the world. They might be this.
I think you mentioned if you're on the path, it's easier to find, right? So what does that mean? What does being on the path mean?
So that's a good question. In the sense of when we mean being on the path, we mean beginning to walk the path internally and connecting with our own inner divinity, and then union with our own individual fractal of source, in the sense of we're all one thing, but we also have our own individual piece of that one thing within us. And the unity with that comes from aligning ourselves with our own unique frequency back to that. Once we're connected to it, we're in unity. But we all have come down and tuned in our own, I guess, we say we choose, in a sense, the higher self chooses what we entune ourselves in. We have a personal psychological profile, but there's one main flavor of our false sense of self that we've chosen to entune ourselves in because our personal individual incarnation has that lesson to learn. And in that sense, to connect back to that internally is when we truly get back on the path. Not saying that before that we don't walk a path too, or we seek. But first, usually, in today's society, we tend to, hopefully find a right-handed path. There's two paths that are related to the seeking part of the journey before we find the true path within. And they're all split in duality. If you go too far down either one of them, you end up falling into probably a deeper ego because they're working with energies and things of the occult, and you actually strengthen the ego. But in the beginning, generally, since society right now is to the left, we tend to usually find a right-handed path, whether that's Gnosis or something like Sufism, Hinduism, Buddhism, the one that has the mysteries, because that's obviously a lot more popular. So that a lot of them could be more exoteric and not have the mysteries. So you have to find the right school in those decisions. It really doesn't matter the school, because all of the schools are supposed to be signposts to help us find the school that's within, and that's the biggest thing. Because what happens is if we take any one of those methods too far, and we miss that point, we miss that middle point, then the right hand becomes the left hand, because the poles are both the ego.
Okay.
It's hard to know where the middle is.
Yeah.
And no one can actually tell you. But the more that we come into the present and work with the awareness, the more we find that we intuitively know what we're doing and what we are supposed to do. And we can sense when we're out of balance. We start to sense we have a kind of internal clinging or some kind of resistance, something we don't like, whether it's a craving or aversion, something we become attached to externally, whether it's a job or money or a person or a particular school, a particular way. We form that attachment, and to the extent to which we cling, that same extent is to which we experience pain. So in the end, we slowly discover as we wake up that we need to have nowhere that we actually stand and be everywhere simultaneously. So we're not clinging to any one thing, but we honor the experiences that we go through without being attached to particular outcomes.
It's like J.K. would have said, it's the pathless path.
Yes, yes, exactly.
And that's what we're looking for, is the pathless path. But usually we have to start on the path that was finding there. Not necessarily. Everyone is in a different position too. So there's no absolutes. Only the ego deals with absolutes. Only the Sith deals with absolutes, right? It's a Star Wars line. But I mean, if we're able to find our way there, without a method, that's fine too. But the real goal is to find that pathless path. That's beyond that middle path is the pathless path, because it comes down to mission and purpose. And truly, even the people that find up being vibratorily pulled to the left or the right-handed path because that's where they're at in their journey, or even someone who has no interest in spirituality at all and just is at that point in their journey, that's also a stage of development. To a certain extent, divine purpose is to awaken the consciousness and help others awaken it. And on a meta level, every single person's already doing that. Because if you're asleep and doing something really negative, then maybe it's your purpose to create the negative polarity, and the construct of everything is always at balance. Like right now, objectively, everything is at balance. It's a law of one. The only purpose of being is to be and to exist. So in the manifestation, if there's people going this way, there has to be people going this way. And actually, to an extent, it's much easier for someone's higher self to get them to go do stuff in ego, because all it has to do is program that incarnation with egos, and then give it, and then never try to contact it, because it's a machine. It's harder to get us to listen and go in the other direction. But the thing is, mission, which is the other opposite, mission and purpose. Mission is our own unique expression of that divine purpose, and that's why we all walk the same path, we all walk a different path. Technically, it's all just different stages on one path, where one being learning and teaching ourselves across all space and time through many parallel realities, all in this moment right now. So, yeah, I mean, the mission is the expression of that. But technically, even if someone seems like they're not awakening, they are still doing that purpose, because their purpose might be to provide language which helps others awaken. So in a sense, even though they're not awakening, because that's not their point, they're still helping others awaken.
We need them to not awaken just yet.
Right.
Yes, they'll have their turn later. Any other questions? No? Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending.